Missouri doesn't show up on most retirement shortlists, and that's exactly why it should be on yours. While everyone is chasing Asheville or Scottsdale, a different kind of buyer has been quietly acquiring land in the Ozark Mountains. Land under $5,000 an acre, in counties that have never adopted mandatory building codes. No permits for the structure you want to build. No zoning board second-guessing your solar array. Just land, water, and a state cost of living index sitting at 88.9, nearly 12% below the national average. This video covers 15 towns across Missouri's southern mountain counties. Each one has a specific reason it works for off-grid living, whether that's geological water abundance, the lowest property taxes in the state, or a border position that gives you code-free building on one side and a hospital on the other. Some of these towns are moving fast, a few are practically hidden, all of them make the math work in a way that most retirement destinations simply cannot. Here are 15 cheap Missouri mountain towns perfect for off-grid living. Eminence. Shannon County has never adopted mandatory residential building codes. That's not a loophole. That's been the county's permanent legal posture. In the unincorporated land surrounding Eminence, you can build an earthbag home, a cob structure, or a tiny house on a foundation without pulling a single permit. The only state requirement is septic approval. The current river stabilizes the local water table across the surrounding ridges and hollows, and the region runs a 260-day growing season, long enough to support genuine food production. The catch is the market. Median home prices in Eminence proper have climbed to around $239,000, pushed up by tourism traffic along the Ozark National Scenic Riverways. That number doesn't represent the real opportunity here. Large, raw land tracts, 20 to 40 acres in the county interior, are running closer to $4,100 per acre. That's where the value is. The smaller you go, the more you pay per acre. The county's regulatory freedom drives demand for build-ready plots, which inflates anything under 2 acres considerably. Winona. Winona sits in the same county as Eminence, same legal freedoms, lower price pressure. The effective property tax rate here is approximately 0.62%, which already sits below Shannon County's median. On a modest rural property, that translates to annual taxes well under $1,000. The Sun Clan's conservation area borders Winona, 40,800 acres of state wilderness that provides access to timber and hunting without requiring ownership of the land itself. White-tailed deer and wild turkey are common. Wood for heat is available. Median sale prices for existing homes hover around $190,000, which is $50,000 below Eminence. The technical challenge here is humidity. 60 to 75% on average, which demands specific building choices. Moisture-resistant barriers, elevated foundations, and standing seam metal roofing are standard among experienced builders in this part of the Ozark. Forest belt. The slightly acidic rainfall accelerates corrosion on cheaper roofing materials. People who skip those details tend to regret it within a few seasons. And if you think Winona's tax rate is hard to beat, wait until you see what Texas County is doing. Gainesville. Most off-grid regions in the American West have a water problem. Gainesville has the opposite. The town sits atop the Ozark Plateau, directly above a section of the Ozark Aquifer that runs 600 to 1,600 feet thick. Well yields in this area can exceed 2,000 gallons per minute, enough to support livestock operations and large-scale crop irrigation without tapping municipal systems. Ozark County maintains code-free status for unincorporated residential construction, and the market recently shifted in buyers' favor. As of late 2025, the median home sale price dropped nearly 9.5% year over year. That kind of correction doesn't hold in a county with no zoning restrictions and an aquifer this productive. The practical play here is a 10 to 20 acre parcel targeting the aquifer's deeper, cleaner strata, below 300 feet where mineral content drops and water quality improves. Budget around $4,100 per acre at that scale. For anyone whose off-grid vision includes animals or a serious garden, Gainesville removes the single constraint that kills those plans everywhere else. Theodosia. Theodosia sits on a peninsula of Bull Shoals Lake in karst territory, a landscape built from dissolved rock riddled with sinkholes, caves, and underground streams. That geology creates something genuinely useful, natural springs that can be tapped for gravity-fed water delivery. No pump, no power draw, no drilling cost. The trade-off is foundation complexity. Karst terrain is unstable in ways that don't always show up on a survey. Experienced builders here spend more time on site selection than on almost anything else. Solar potential in Theodosia is strong. The area logs roughly 2,000 to 2,700 annual sunshine hours, with June producing around 6.7 kilowatt hours per square meter per day, enough surplus to cover summer air conditioning demand on a small structure. A 2 to 5 kilowatt array handles year-round essentials. Raw land runs between $3,800 and $10,000 per acre depending on proximity to the lake. The steeper, more remote hillside plots, the ones that require four-wheel drive to access, tend to sit at the lower end of that range. The geographic barrier functions as natural privacy for people who want the property essentially invisible from any road. Ava. Douglas County has no mandatory building codes for unincorporated areas. That legal environment has gradually attracted a specific kind of resident: alternative builders, permaculture practitioners, people running serious homesteads. The community has been self-selecting towards self-sufficiency for years. Ava itself provides infrastructure backup, a functioning clinic, a tractor supply, and proximity to Baker Creek Seeds in nearby Seymour, which is one of the largest heirloom seed operations in the country. For anyone building toward food independence, that last detail matters more than it sounds. The land around Ava tends to include what local realtors call Goldilocks tracts, 5 to 60 acres with a mix of mature hardwood and open pasture. The pasture handles animals and gardens. The timber handles heat and building material. Many wooded tracts feature natural flat areas that reduce excavation costs significantly for owner builders. Homestead scale parcels run around $5,100 per acre. Okay, but Ava is practically urban compared to what comes next. Drury. Drury is a different category of remote. This unincorporated Douglas County community sits 5 or more miles from the nearest paved road, deep inside mature forest. Properties here routinely spend over 170 days on the market, which is actually useful if you need time to investigate easements and historical boundaries, both of which matter in a region where property lines are sometimes more customary than surveyed. The access issue is real. Clay roads in the Missouri Ozarks become dangerous in winter, not inconvenient, dangerous. Hauling water or supplies when the surface turns to ice-slicked mud is a serious operational problem that no solar array can solve. Successful residents here install high-capacity rainwater collection systems or drill bedrock wells before almost everything else. A 20-acre open pasture in Drury runs around $85,000. Wooded tracts around 17 acres are available near $55,000. The price is low. Because the commitment is high, Drury is where the off-grid philosophy gets tested against daily physical reality, and not everyone passes. Squires. Squires sits at a mean elevation of roughly 1,283 feet on long south-facing ridges, which makes it one of the better positioned locations in the Ozarks for passive solar construction. A home sited correctly on that ridge geometry captures maximum winter sun without modification. That thermal gain cuts wood fuel demand measurably, and wood fuel is a real cost in a region with genuine winters. The elevation also provides natural drainage. River bottom properties throughout the Ozarks are prone to flash flooding. The region can receive 4.5 inches of rain in a single 24-hour period. Squires sits above that risk. The ridge terrain also offers better visibility than low-lying hollows. Community here centers on intentional self-sufficiency. Local homesteads practice permaculture focused on wild edibles and native plants, which adds a practical knowledge resource for new arrivals. Land averages around $6,664 per acre, often including natural springs and old-growth features that rarely show up in flatland listings. For retirees thinking long-term, the proximity to Ava means medical backup is roughly 20 minutes out. That proximity matters more the older you get. Houston. Texas County carries the lowest property tax rate in this entire list, 0.53%. On a $150,000 property, that's roughly $800 a year, annual. The county also maintains code-free status for unincorporated construction. Houston solves a problem that most rural off-grid locations cannot. Cox Health at Home operates here, alongside specialized clinics, placing professional medical care within roughly 20 minutes of properties that sit at the end of private drives bordering the Mark Twain National Forest. For retirees, that proximity is often the deciding variable, the one that turns an interesting location into a viable permanent address. The Big Piney River runs through many estates in the area, providing not just water access, but fertile river bottom soil suited to intensive gardening. Land in the 10 to 20 acre range runs around $5,500 per acre. Median days on market in the county sits at 167, which means careful buyers have time to compare parcels without being rushed. Cabool. Cabool has a significant Amish population, and that demographic fact changes what's available here. The Amish never stopped using 19th century building methods, log construction, hand-dug wells, non-electric food preservation. And in Cabool, that knowledge circulates in a functioning local market. New off-grid residents can source handcrafted materials and skilled labor that simply doesn't exist in most parts of the country anymore. The terrain around Cabool is gentler than the deep Shannon County ridges. Rolling pasture supports goats, cattle, and orchard production. Many properties include permanent creek frontage, live water that doesn't depend on seasonal rainfall. Land acquisition here often works on seller financing through specialized land companies. 9 to 40 acre tracts are available with low down payments and no credit checks. That structure lowers the barrier for buyers who have income but limited savings. The Homesteading Life Conference provides ongoing connection to regional solar and wind energy specialists for people building systems from scratch and needing guidance they can't find on YouTube. Licking. Licking's off-grid market is built around Amish-constructed cabins on wooded tracts ranging from 30 to 50 acres. These are structures built with on-site milled pine, hand-carved interior details, spiral staircases to sleeping lofts, full walkout basements that double as storm shelter. That construction quality typically requires either significant money or significant personal labor. In Licking, it shows up in the mid-range listings. Average land price in the area sits at around $7,521 per acre, reflecting the value of mature standing timber and established road access. Proximity to Montauk State Trout Park signals consistent environmental quality and a reliable water table. State parks don't maintain that caliber of natural resource next to degraded land. One practical detail sets Licking apart from most towns on this list. Grid electricity exists nearby on adjacent properties. Most residents choose off-grid independence, but the option to establish a partial grid tie connection remains available if needs change. That flexibility has real value for people who aren't fully certain how far off grid they actually want to live permanently. Raymondville. Raymondville is an unincorporated Texas County community where a 4-acre parcel runs around $30,000. That's the lowest land entry point on this list. Texas County's code-free status means structural design is entirely the owner's decision. Recycled materials, unconventional layouts, owner built from the foundation up. Clearing forested hillside terrain is labor intensive regardless of budget. The Raymondville community has developed a practical response. Neighbors coordinate the use of heavy equipment, tractors, front-end loaders, bush hogs, collectively. The cooperation isn't sentimental. It's a functional solution to a logistical problem that nobody can solve efficiently alone on a tight budget. The upper end of the Raymondville market reaches into high-end cabin territory, with finished structures on 19-acre properties listing near $550,000. But the entry-level dynamic is what matters for budget buyers. $30,000 for unrestricted land in a code-free county is a number that doesn't surface in many other states, and certainly not near this much wilderness. Alton. Oregon County averages 26 days on market. That pace is driven by the 11-point River, a federally designated wild and scenic waterway that runs through the county and legally limits upstream development. The designation protects water quality in ways no local ordinance can override. Because it's federal law, large tracts here run 70 to 155 acres, often sharing borders with the Mark Twain National Forest. That adjacency creates private wilderness buffers that function as de facto national forest access without public traffic. Alton itself has a True Value hardware store and a pharmacy, the minimum service infrastructure for remote residents who can't afford a 3-hour drive to a city every time something breaks. Almost all off-grid setups in Alton run on solar exclusively. Running utility lines through dense Ozark forest over rocky karst terrain costs more than most complete solar installations. The landscape makes the energy decision before the buyer does. Thayer. Thayer sits directly on the Missouri-Arkansas state line. The Missouri side falls under Oregon County's code-free jurisdiction. The Arkansas side has a Walmart Supercenter and Ozarks Healthcare, a 114-bed acute care facility. That combination doesn't exist anywhere else on this list. You can build without structural oversight on your property and reach a regional hospital without a long drive. For retirees specifically, that pairing resolves the tension that makes most remote off-grid locations impractical as a permanent residence. You're not choosing between freedom and medical access. You're getting both at the same address. The geology beneath Thayer's karst plateau, dolomite bedrock with fracture patterns that affect well drilling costs. A complete private well system in this area typically runs between $3,000 and $10,000, depending on depth and local fracture conditions. Once installed, it provides water independence indefinitely. The drilling variables are worth investigating before purchase, but they're a one-time cost against decades of free water. Birch Tree. Birch Tree sits on the Shannon-Oregon County line and hosts what may be the most accessible complete off-grid setup in southern Missouri. The format appears consistently across listings: 10 secluded acres, a pre-built 12 by 24 foot cabin, a small solar array, and a pond. Total package under $50,000. Winter lows here drop into the low 20s. Spray foam insulation addresses that directly, delivering roughly 40% energy savings over standard bat insulation. Composting toilets handle sanitation on rocky ground, where traditional septic drain fields are difficult or impossible to excavate cleanly. The Howell, Oregon Electric Cooperative operates across the 6-county region. Off-grid residents won't use the service, but its presence keeps the surrounding area economically stable. Remote communities without utility infrastructure tend to lose services over time. Gas stations close, hardware stores disappear. Birch Tree doesn't face that erosion. Land runs around $6,332 per acre at the middle market scale. For someone who wants to move directly into functioning off-grid infrastructure rather than building from scratch across multiple seasons, this is the most efficient starting point on the list. Bakersfield. Bakersfield sits in southeastern Ozark County, bordered on multiple sides by the Mark Twain National Forest. That boundary functions as a permanent buffer against the resort area price inflation visible in Branson and Lake of the Ozarks. The forest will never be developed, which means the pressure that drives prices up in tourist-adjacent markets simply doesn't reach here. Existing rock homes and cabins in the area start around $130,000. Land parcels run 4.5 to 10 acres at prices well below county averages elsewhere in this video. Sub 1% property taxes hold the ongoing cost low against any fixed income. The remoteness has one honest consequence: emergency response times are long. Residents here address that by designing storage and security into their solar setups specifically. Theft-resistant enclosures for battery banks and generators are standard practice in an area where waiting for help is the only realistic option. Bakersfield isn't a fallback. It's the mathematical endpoint of everything this list has been building toward. Minimum recurring costs, maximum land buffer, and permanent insulation from the inflation pressures that make retirement planning difficult everywhere else. 15 towns, 5 regulatory counties, 1 consistent pattern. Missouri's southern mountain regions have assembled an environment where low land prices, permissive building law, reliable water, and sub 1% property taxes occupy the same geography. That specific combination is rare. Most affordable states trade one variable for another. Cheap land but no water, code-free building but high taxes, good healthcare proximity but resort area pricing. The Ozarks don't force that trade-off. The terrain is demanding. Winters on clay roads are not abstract. Well, drilling costs real money. Solar systems require oversizing for December's 1.9 kilowatt hours per square meter per day. The humidity in the forest belt accelerates rot on the wrong materials. None of that changes the underlying math. It narrows the field to buyers who planned for the physical reality before they arrived, rather than after. The legal architecture matters as much as the price. Shannon, Douglas, Texas, Oregon, and Ozark counties have maintained code-free status for unincorporated construction, not as an oversight, but as a deliberate expression of home rule governance. That's not going to reverse overnight. Missouri's decentralized regulatory posture is baked into the state's political identity in ways that most coastal states haven't been willing to replicate, and probably won't. The window varies by location. Oregon County averages 26 days on market. Ozark County's recent 9.5% price correction is a stabilization, not a collapse. And corrections in code-free rural counties with productive aquifers don't stay depressed. Shannon County raw land holds value precisely because the regulatory environment there doesn't replicate anywhere nearby at that price point. All of this data is publicly available. None of it is obscure. It describes a region that people with means have been quietly moving into while the broader retirement conversation stays focused on states with higher profiles and significantly higher costs. The Ozarks aren't a secret. They're just a place most people never looked at closely enough to understand what the numbers were actually saying.